Hey folks, this is going to be as short as I can make it a very brief video on astrology and sexual assault, and also a specific personal message to sexual assault survivors. So let's start with the astrology first. So you're going to hear a lot of people talking about astrology and astrological markers for sexual assault in a chart. And, like I heard the other day before I launched into somebody's ass like a rocket. Well, someone's Mars on another person's Venus is kind of rapey. So here's the thing, right? Sexual assault is a form of trauma, all right? And unfortunately, right now, sexual assault is so ubiquitous and so pervasive. It is literally almost normal. It is such a normal occurrence and such a frequent occurrence that rather than looking at these things as the horror that it is and the robbery of innocence that it is and the betrayal of trust that it is, many of us, the first thing we do when we hear the words rape is we immediately start looking for reasons why this didn't happen, or how this is wrong or how the victim was lying, right? This is all what the Me Too movement is about. The Me Too movement is not about making men these evil monsters. The Me Too movement is about making it clear just how pervasive and ubiquitous sexual assault is, not just to women, but also to men as victims, and making it clear to other victims who have not said anything that they are not alone. It's a very, very big deal because nobody wants to be called a liar. You've already been betrayed and hurt and traumatized. You don't want to be called a liar on top of it. So the thing about it is trauma by itself, whether it's the trauma of losing your child in a car accident or the trauma of being in a war, and watching people die around you or having to kill people and coming back now to normal civilization, or the trauma of being sexually assaulted, no matter what the circumstances were, these are all trauma. And trauma is ruled, yes, astrologically by Pluto. The thing to understand when you look at Pluto in a chart is that Pluto does not signify what kind of trauma it is. There's nothing in astrology so far as we know it, and certainly the ancients didn't have descriptors for this, because if you look at Greek mythology, every single freaking Greek god is a rapist, right? So they wouldn't have seen it as trauma if the gods were doing it. It was just a normal everyday occurrence that, male gods did, which means male mortals were just as likely to do it. And it was just the way nature was. So they wouldn't necessarily have had words for trauma, or certainly not sexual trauma in their vocabulary. And they were much better doing the astrology than we are, because we're standing on the shoulders of giants, building on the work that they've done. With that said, there's no way to make a distinction between the trauma from war and the trauma from the loss of a child and the trauma, from sexual assault. But trauma will show up in a chart, and it will be under the domain of Pluto. Now, Pluto rules a number of things. It's not just trauma. Pluto also rules big business, big money, large masses of people, large scale disasters, natural disasters. Pluto has a lot, like all the planets, has a lot of rulership. When we look at Pluto in correlation to matters of trauma, the thing to understand is that Pluto represents very specific things that occur when we experience trauma. Pluto covers the experience of, pay attention, this is important, the loss of innocence, the betrayal of trust, the abuse of power, the violation of the boundaries we need that allow us to be autonomous and empowered individuals. Okay? Pluto also rules things that are invasive and go much further and much deeper than is allowable or necessary in a normal life. Surgery, which involves entering the body in ways that are deeper and much more invasive than is allowable or normal in normal life, comes under Pluto. Pluto also has correlation with rebuilding from the ground up. It is the phoenix. It is taking that which has been decimated beyond all recognition. There is nothing left except the absolute particles that become building blocks of smaller things that become larger things that actually finally become things we recognize. That rebuilding from the ashes, that's Pluto. And the problem is when you rebuild from the ashes, you can never rebuild the thing that you lost. All those ashes can be put together and repackaged and turned into something, but it is something else. It will never be what it was. That is Pluto. So when you look at Pluto in a chart, when you look at a very strong or heavily emphasized Pluto in a chart, the thing to understand is that you are dealing with somebody who's on a life path that has a very special price that has to be paid for them to be able to enter into a whole other realm. And that entering into another realm is not a de facto setting or default option, it's a choice. Because in this one way, Pluto gives people choice. All right. And this is, for Plutonians, one of the things that they know is that literally at the end of the day, when it comes right down to it, those are the only choices we have. You can survive this and move on and take those ashes and build it into something, but it will never be what it originally was. Or you can sit and cry in the ashes until it's over because you're stuck there. This is a very Plutonian thing. It's a very Plutonian experience, and people who are Plutonian that have been through these experiences would never wish this on other people. This is not something to aspire to. So when you see strong Pluto themes in a chart, understand you're dealing with somebody who's got a very special agenda with a very, very high price that has to be paid in this lifetime for their ability to have an experience that normal people are never going to have and nobody should ever have, and to be able to survive that, because the other side of Pluto also understand is that Pluto is about legacy. It's about what we leave behind. It's about what we give um, other people to help empower and protect them and lift them up out of this abyss of darkness. Pluto is the lifeline or the hand that reaches down into the well and pulls the person up before they drown. Okay. But there's a high price to pay, unfortunately, to be strong enough to be able to be that person for other people. And it's thankless. You don't get awards for this. So sometimes you'll hear amateur astrologers and bad professional astrologers and lay people, but certainly people who should know better and do it anyway, talk about Pluto in a chart like, oh, Pluto, sex, rape, whoa, and that's wrong, and it's wrong on a lot of levels. So on an individual level, if you're looking at an individual strong Pluto in their chart, there's a whole lifetime here, or will be a whole lifetime here, of things that you couldn't possibly fathom unless you've been there yourself. Okay, so you're in no position to open up that can of worms unless you're also qualified and able to deal with the cleanup that may come with it. People who are very Plutonian understand what it means to be triggered. So whether it's having a quote unquote flashback, which is what being triggered is, right? Having a flashback to the war that you survived and you thought you were over, but it's 20 years later and now suddenly you're reliving the event. Or you're being triggered because you saw somebody on the street that looked just like your kid that died in a car crash at 14. Or like now, with this Kavanaugh nomination and the insensitive, predictable tactics and bullying that they are using to try and gaslight and discredit and make the accuser look like a liar, even though every single thing points to her telling the truth. And she's done everything she can to even make clear that what she's telling is the truth and substantiated, so far as being willing and encouraging and asking for a proper and formal FBI investigation to settle the matter once and for all, and being denied it. All of these things. These are all under Pluto's domain, and this is all about what it means to be triggered, right? The responses to this. It's not fun and it's not good. And these are all Pluto. So when you see this in a chart, if this is not your experience, don't your job as somebody who's never been through these things is literally to sit down, shut up, and just listen. And if they don't want to offer anything and they don't want to explain anything, You don't get to ask. This is not your, this is not tragedy porn. You don't get to get your little titillation kicks asking for the gory details. Anytime you're dealing with any type of trauma, I want you to remember and think of it in this context. All trauma is literally the kind of trauma, emotionally and psychologically, that a person would experience if their child died in front of them. Okay. And you wouldn't ask somebody who lost their child in a car crash or who survived a car accident, but all their children died in it with them. You wouldn't ask them for the gory details. You wouldn't ask them to tell you all about it. Like, you wouldn't go there with them. All right. That same level of courtesy and respect is the same courtesy and level of respect you should be giving people who have suffered other kinds of trauma, because it's just as horrific to them, and it's just as distasteful and perverse and sick for you to ask ghoulish questions about that. Okay. So there's that. So what do we do when we see somebody who's got Pluto strong on their chart? Well, you understand that you're dealing with a very different creature. This is somebody who has been or will go through things that you couldn't even possibly imagine in this lifetime. And they may or may not survive it. They may or may not get stuck there. And it's not anybody else's job or work to move them past that. This is something very, very special and unique for them that they have to work through. When you do see that, the things to understand is that ultimately, at the end of the day, the large themes in this process for the Pluto person has to do with legacy and what they're leaving behind and what they're able to give other people who are able to go through similar situations, or not able to, but who have to go through similar situations. If I lose my child in a car accident and I'm in the car with my child, or something to that effect, right? Unless you've lost your child too, there's nothing you're going to be able to say to me that's going to help, because you don't know. You have no idea. And it's not about what you tell me. It's also about the things that you don't make the mistake of saying. And it's also about where you know instinctively to just shut up and be quiet, and let me have the silence. These are the things that make a difference. And only somebody who's been through that experience gets that. Okay. So and that's the legacy. That is the thing. We are the hand that reaches down in the well that pulls other people up, because we've been there, done that, survived it, and we get it. Okay. The other thing to understand with Pluto's strong or dominant theme in a chart is the betrayal, and being objectified and reduced to nothing, having your ego stripped from you. And not ego like, oh, I love myself so much, not that kind of ego, but ego in a sense of knowing who you are and knowing that you matter in this world and knowing that you have a right to be here. This is all part of the ego id equation in psychology, right? And for Plutonians, having that robbed of you, stripped from you, taken away from you, like literally having your dignity taken away, humiliation, being demeaned or degraded to such a point that you're nothing, you're lower than nothing. Okay. And being betrayed by the very people or situations or circumstances that you should have been able to have confidence in, right? These are Pluto experiences. So one of the most important things that we should not do is become part of that problem. They already have learned very, very hard and expensive lessons about human nature and people that you can and can't trust and circumstances that you can or cannot put your faith in. We don't need to be one more thing that betrays them. And finally, Pluto, strong dominant Pluto themes, is very much about faith. People with strong dominant Pluto themes have had their faith crushed. Crushed. Some of them get it back. Some of them never do. It's not our job to tell them, oh, well, you got to have faith and blah, blah. It's not our job to offer them platitudes and advice. No, they have their process. This is the thing that they need to go through. They need to sort this out on their own. Wherever that they are at is good. So they should not have to explain anything to you. They should not have to answer questions for you. They should not have to dig up any of that for your understanding. It's not your job to understand, because you either do or you don't. And astrology will not make you suddenly an expert in things you've never been through. So that's what I want you guys to keep in mind. as astrologers when you're looking at someone's chart. Because there are way too many of you out there that are way too free with your words, and way too, I can't begin to tell you some of the weirdos I've had to deal with. Typically, in my experience, have always been suburban housewives. Oh my God, the worst, right? They're all about tragedy porn. So the minute they suspect any kind of titillating history, like sexual trauma, they want all the details. It's creepy and gross, so don't do it. And you thought creepy and gross was only the domain of old men, right? So there's that. Now, the other thing, mm, sorry. The other thing um, with Pluto and Mars and making these judgment calls when you're looking at a chart. Mars square Venus is kind of rapey. So here's the other problem with astrology and astrologers and amateurs and bad professionals. And that is this. There's not enough understanding of matters of ethics and integrity in our work. So there are a whole lot of people who are just very casual, Mr. Cash, very casual with their words and their speech, and they don't realize and understand the impact and portent of what they're saying and how damaging they could potentially be. And we will have this conversation a lot too. So when you say things like, well, their Mars on your Venus does look kind of rapey, what you're doing is you're essentially accusing an innocent person, possibly, probably, certainly an unsuspecting person, of potentially being a rapist, which that's not the kind of label we want to throw around, right? All right. And it's the same thing as accusing somebody of possibly being a pedophile. This is not an accusation or a label we want to stick on people. And if you say, well, it's just this one relationship and it's only where their Mars is squaring that person's Venus. Well, yeah, but here's the thing. Like, rapists do not always go on to become serial rapists. Okay. Just because somebody rapes somebody once doesn't mean they're going to suddenly go out and start raping everybody they can get their hands on for the next 20 years. Rape is not about sex. There's a whole other, oh my God, there's just a whole other box of stuff that goes on with this that has nothing to do with sex. Absolutely nothing to do with sex. And if you don't understand how that works, I want you to remember rape has nothing to do with your genitals or physical desire. And if you don't believe me, I want you to go and ask any man who's ever had to have something removed from his rectum while he's been in prison. Ask him if rape had anything to do with genitals or sexual desire. Okay? So it doesn't, Mars square Venus in a chart is going to create some conflict or difficulties addressing or connecting on an intimate level, because Mars is very coarse and it's very masculine and very vulgar and very physical. And Venus is all about the social graces and civility. So when someone's Mars is not hooking up with our Venus so easily, it tends to exaggerate these qualities and make it difficult for us to come to a place where we can connect easily. The timing is usually off. Mars is going to come off as a lot more aggressive and coarse than the Venus person is comfortable with. The Venus person is going to come off as much more manipulative and not hypocritical, but like coy, you know what I mean? Just all that sort of stuff, not direct. And it's going to create a lot of problems. That does not necessarily translate into sexual assault. And we need to remember that and how we're looking at these planets and interpreting this for other people and sharing it with them. So Mars in a hard aspect to Venus, the moon, the sun, or the vertex, any of those four personal planets is going to give us situations where the Mars person, and this is across charts, where the Mars person is going to be too energetic, too overbearing, too aggressive, too enthusiastic, too much Mars for the other person to be comfortable with, and it's going to create conflict and problems or misunderstandings. Mars without equal and strong resistance tends to run roughshod, and it doesn't mean that Mars is a bully. It just means that without a check and a balance, Mars can come across as a bully. So between charts, that's what we're going to see. This does not translate into rapey. Like, and don't ever, ever let me catch you saying something like that around me, because I will literally light into you like a bonfire, said my Mars. The other is Pluto. When you see Pluto in one chart, and in one person's chart, making hard aspects, squares or oppositions to the Venus, the Moon, the Sun, or the vertex in the other part, this is a whole other conversation, which we're not going to get into here because Pluto is a lot. We really need to sit down and have a long conversation about Pluto. But it will make things problematic because Pluto is so controlling, and Pluto is so much about boundaries and violation of boundaries and all sort of stuff. And Pluto can be extremely heavy-handed. So that controlling boundary issue, heavy-handed sort of stuff, and also like the insurmountable wall of China kind of thing, with someone's personal planets or sensitive points can make it very difficult for the more sensitive person, because if you're involved with somebody and you're obviously involved with them because you want to get closer to them. That's why we get involved with people. You're involved with somebody, but they keep putting all these walls up to keep you out, and all these locked doors in their psyches with big keep out signs on them. It's going to, after time, it's going to start making you feel bad, because you're going to feel like, well, wait a minute, like I'm sharing all of my information with you. Like, how come you still have secrets from me? I don't understand. So we're going to try and um, instinctively, without thinking about it, we're going to try and open those doors and test those walls to see if they really are like in place and we're not allowed past them. We're going to try and manipulate situations to get them to trust us, or to give us some part of themselves that they're not giving to other people, because clearly they don't let anybody in where that Pluto sits, right? And the challenge, of course, is that, one, we're doing this unconsciously because this is our human nature, all right? But when you do that, because the Pluto person already has in that area of their life, or wherever that thing represents for them personally, boundary issues, control issues, safety issues, like violation issues, you being manipulative is going to set off all the alarms, okay? And that's just going to make things worse. And this is where we tend to see the negative side of Pluto inter aspects with another chart. Pluto conjunct something in a personal chart, that is its own specific thing. Now we're talking deep, deep, deep psyche stuff. And we're not going to get into that here. But also too, Pluto takes time to unfold. So Pluto contacts between charts are not instant. It's not instant oatmeal. It doesn't cook in 3 minutes. Pluto contacts between charts take time to manifest and to have that combination sorted out, that finally unlocks what that Pluto inner aspect is going to be in the charts. They can be good, they can be bad, but again, like everything else in astrology, it's all about combination. So we have to look at everything else in the chart before we start, oh my God, Pluto. Some things we know right off top are going to be problematic, just no matter how you slice it. But that's the most important thing to understand. It is problematic. It is not a label we assign that this person is going to be a serial killer or a rapist or any of that, right? You just can't. So that is my conversation. Yep, we're good. That is my conversation about Mars and Pluto. There's a lot that goes on here. If you have questions or comments, or you want to discuss this more, you can put it down in the comment section, and we can try and have this discussion when I can get some time to get back online. If you put anything derogatory, demeaning, insulting, or otherwise insensitive about sexual assault or something, that's going to get deleted. And if you say something stupid with authority and confidence about inner aspects, like, well, Mars, square Venus is very rapey. If you do something like that in the comment section, I'm going to light into you. I'm going to tell you now, so you might want to think about that. So that's that. And I'm going to close this video with a specific message to sexual assault survivors. So if this is not you and you don't want to listen, go ahead and shut this off now. Have a great day, and we'll talk to you soon. So for all of you out there, girls and boys who are sexual assault survivors, you may find that you have been triggered at various levels over and over and over again since 2016. All right. And it's not getting any better. As a matter of fact, watching what's going on, if you've been paying attention and watching what's going on, how they're handling this business with Kavanaugh and his accuser, Dr. Christine Ford. Um, you may very well be triggered as right now. Okay. I know I am. I know I am, because it pushes all kinds of buttons well above and beyond sexual assault. This literally how they're handling her and this nomination, and how they're trying to just the way they're handling her in this process. It is pushing all the buttons for bullying, scapegoating, and sexual assault. It's just, it's not been great. It has not been great. So if I'm going through it, I'm sure some of you are going through it too. So here's what I want to give you guys. Um, one, if you if you're close to people and you live with people, you you in order to make everybody's life easier, you might want to let them know what's going on. Okay, if you understand that this is what happening, you might want to just kind of let them know what's going on. This is not an excuse for anyone's behavior. This is most importantly not an invitation to have a conversation about it. If you don't want to talk about it, and you don't want to have to explain yourself, and you don't want to get into it, you don't have to. You have that right. You get to decide when and where and who you share any part of yourself with, including this. Okay? This you have and you can do for yourself. But they should have some understanding about what's happening, so they're not completely lost, thinking you've lost your damn mind, or that you're just being evil and angry and mean for no apparent reason. They care about you a lot. At least give them this so they have a context to put your triggered behavior in. If you are being triggered and you need someone to talk to, I strongly recommend that you talk to somebody, just to talk about your feelings and how you're feeling. You know, even if it's just you're having a really crappy day and everything's bothering you more than normal. If that's all you need to talk about, then that's okay too, and you should find someone to talk about. Um, the There's a RAIN, the Resource Center for Abuse and Incest Survivors, a network of survivors, is online. I will put a link in the comments below. And there are certainly sexual assault or rape crisis hotlines around that you can call locally if you need someone to talk to that's more local, and they will listen. They will listen. That's what they're there for. They're all volunteers, and they're there because they care. And finally, understand that you matter, and it's good. We're going to be okay. We are going to be okay. So the confirmation vote apparently is on Monday. Um, so this means one of two things, and in both outcomes, we still have a lot of work ahead of us. So on the one hand, if he is confirmed, we have a lot of work ahead of us. This will not stand, and we cannot let it stop here, especially after how they've been handling Dr. Ford, which basically symbolizes and represents how they handle and will handle all victims of sexual assault moving forward. We cannot let this stand. So our work cannot end here. We must rise up and be heard and take action to address this. This would be an excellent place for you to take your history and put it to good use. If he does not get confirmed, we are not out of the woods yet. You've seen the nightmare parade of criminals, crimes against humanity, criminals coming out of the GOP and our current Congress, and everywhere else. Like they're literally like roaches coming out of the woodwork, and scattering the light. So we still have a lot more work to do, and this is a very important time that we get active and we show our support for other people, um, in whatever way they can. And it doesn't necessarily have to be going out and being politically active, but it does mean that we should give from our strength to other people who are going through this, and this may be more fresh for them, and they may need your hand to reach down that well. And at the end of the day, most important, do your self-care. This is the time to batten down the hatches and really get into your self-care and take care of yourself and put your support systems in place. We've got quite the fight ahead of us because we are trying to move mountains here. So right now we have some measure of peace and leeway. Get your support systems in, find the ways that you can care for yourself best, and learn to recognize your own symptoms and signs that you're being triggered and how you respond to that, so you know you are prepared and for ahead of time if it happens again. And that's it. that's it. So if you have any questions or comments, leave them below. If you want to reach out personally, you can always reach me by email. I can't guarantee that I'll have time to respond, but I would certainly read it and do the best that I can. If you really need someone to talk to, again, call your local rape crisis hotlines or the um, Resource Center for Abuse and Incest Survivors, and understand that more than anything else, you do matter. All right, go kick some ass.